Live from southern Israel, this is BBC News. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu outlines his first future plans for the Gaza Strip, saying that Israel will have overall security responsibility for Gaza once the conflict ends. As fighting enters its fifth week, the death toll in Gaza exceeds 10,000, more than 4,000 of them children, according to Gaza's health ministry.
I'm Frankie McCamley in London, also in the programme. King Charles will deliver his first King's Speech since becoming monarch as part of the state opening of Parliament. This is the scene live in Westminster, from where we will bring you all of the pomp and ceremony.
Welcome to BBC News. We're broadcasting live from southern Israel, about a mile or so, 3 kilometres away from the Gaza Strip, where Israel's military offensive continues to intensify. It is now a month since Hamas launched its surprise attack on Israel, killing 1,400 people and taking more than 240 hostage, the deadliest attack in Israel's history. The Israeli military launched a huge retaliatory military offensive that continues to intensify. We have heard the continuing sound of artillery thuds and airstrikes over there in Gaza all morning. Overnight, the Israeli Prime Minister made his first comments on the future of Gaza, saying that the country will have overall security responsibility for the Gaza Strip for an indefinite period once the fighting is over. In the last few minutes, the World Health Organization said 160 healthcare workers had died on duty in Gaza and called for a lifting of restrictions on medical aid, saying some doctors were performing operations, including amputations, without anesthetics. It comes as the health ministry in Gaza, run by Hamas, which is designated a terrorist organization by the UK, reported more than 10,000 people have been killed in the territory since the war began. Our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell has all the very latest.
1 month on from the darkest of days. Here, by the Western Wall, the holiest place where Jews can pray, a candle was lit for each of the estimated 1,400 lives lost. And outside, on the wall of Jerusalem's old city, the faces of some 240 still missing, being held hostage in Gaza. Israelis are still reeling from the horror of the 7th of October, the deadliest day in their country's 75-year history. A day when a party ground became the scene of mass slaughter, when thousands of Hamas fighters broke out of Gaza and gunned down families. After he left his home to see what was happening, Avichai Brodich's wife and 3 children were snatched.
You know, it's been 31 days and that's too long to be without my kids and my wife, and for them to be held captive in a foreign place, you know, underground, in a small room, and I don't know in what situation they are in, health-wise, or, you know, if they're being fed, taken care of.
And for 4 weeks, ordinary people in Gaza have been paying a heavy price, with Israel besieging the small coastal strip and pounding it with airstrikes, determined to eradicate Hamas, which is in control here. The UN calls it inhuman collective suffering. The figures are staggering, with health officials in Gaza now saying that more than 10,000 have been killed, including over 4,100 children. Some 1.5 million are homeless, including Haitham.
The situation is getting worse day after day. Yesterday they hit our relatives, 15 people, and we're displaced. There's no food, no water. When my son goes to pick up water gallon, he queues for 3 to 4 hours in the line. They struck bakeries. We don't have bread.
As Israeli ground forces advance inside Gaza, the Prime Minister is resisting international calls for a ceasefire and has been giving the first clue about what might happen here after the war.
I think Israel will, for an indefinite period, will have the overall security responsibility, because we've seen what happens When we don't have it, when we don't have that security responsibility, what we have is the eruption of Hamas terror on a scale that we couldn't imagine.
But Israel's actions are being watched around the region, with growing fears of this conflict spreading. Last night, Israel says it struck targets belonging to the powerful armed group Hezbollah in Lebanon. Their cross-border fighting is already the worst in years. So much about the past month has been unprecedented, including the scale of suffering. And there's still no end in sight. Yolande Nell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Yolande there with the latest on the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, and also with those comments from Benjamin Netanyahu about what happens next. There has been a lot of criticism over the apparent lack of a long-term strategy, an exit strategy even, for Israel once this Gaza conflict finishes, and talk of who could run Gaza afterwards. Netanyahu suggesting that it should be Israel that has security responsibility, in his words, indefinitely for the Gaza Strip. Well, let's discuss this all a little further and get the take of Yotam Confino, who is the foreign editor for Jewish News, who can join us now from Tel Aviv. Yotam, thank you very much indeed for talking to us here on BBC News. What is your reaction to Benjamin Netanyahu's comments? Do you believe that that suggests that Israel is preparing to reoccupy the Gaza Strip after its troops left in 2005?
That is what it looks like, but I think it's important also to mention the latest news we got from the Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, to also shed some light on what might happen after Israel removes Hamas from power in Gaza. He said Israel will have to maintain operational freedom inside Gaza. In other words, the army will have to be able to operate everywhere in Gaza whenever it wants, and then that's similar to what it's doing in the West Bank. So there's a clearer picture now of what will happen. It will likely be a similar situation from what we're seeing in the West Bank. Now, I don't think that Israel would like to take responsibility for those 2 million Palestinians, which means that there'll have to be some sort of an interim government in place. But at least when it comes to security, Israel will likely be on the ground in Gaza the day after.
You talk about it being a similar situation, or it could become a similar situation to the West Bank, but of course, the West Bank is run by Hamas's opponent, and in Fatah, and in Gaza there is much more hostility to Israel. And after this conflict, of course, that hostility likely to be even further still. So, is it realistic to suggest that that Gaza could become a bit closer into Israel's orbit, and that Israel could have full operational freedom in there? What's the reaction likely to be from Gazan citizens to that?
Well, they won't like it, that's for sure. They won't want to have Israelis on the ground at all. The question is, do they want to have the Palestinian Authority running their lives? I'm not so sure about that either. So there really is no good solution here. It's just a lot of different bad alternatives. But the reason why Israel doesn't have a plan, really a clear plan, is because they were taken by surprise by October 7th, the massacre. So it's only now a month in that it's consulted with the United States and with allies and in general trying to come up with some sort of a plan, which really isn't the plan. If all you have is to remove Hamas from power and keep your security boundaries clear, then there's still 2 million people that somehow need governance. Now, a couple of things have been suggested. It could be that the United Nations will enter the picture and somehow help alleviate the pressure on the Palestinians. It could be that Israel actually does take Gaza again, occupy the entire place, install settlements, like it was before 2005 when they pulled out. Or the last alternative would be, as I mentioned, the Palestinian Authority somehow regaining control in there. But that is a very, very bad solution for the Palestinian Authority, because they will be seen as complicit in what Israel is doing in Gaza now. And I'm also not sure that they are likely to take part in that.
And what about the issue of Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank? I mean, if Gaza were to come under Israel's security responsibility, would you foresee Israeli settlers then expanding into a future Gaza post-Hamas?
That is almost a certain guarantee that the settlers would like to go back to Gaza. A lot of them were kicked out in 2005 when Israel withdrew and evacuated from Gaza. Many of them have been dreaming of the day that they could go back and settle in Gaza. And we also know this for a fact. The leaders of the religious Zionist movement and the religious Zionist party, they have made it very clear that Israel should absolutely be in Gaza. They have no intentions of handing Gaza over to the Palestinian Authority. They would like to be there on the ground and live there.
Okay, Yotam Confino from the Jewish News, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Well, the humanitarian situation, of course, on the ground continues to worsen, and we are getting some horrendous lines coming out from the World Health Organization, who are saying that 160 healthcare workers have died since the Israeli military offensive began, and that some operations, including amputations, are having to take place without anesthetics, given the shortage of medical aid there. That, in addition, of course, to the shortage in food aid. There are some trucks that are coming across the Rafah crossing from Egypt into southern Gaza, but a fraction of what is needed and a fraction of what there was before this conflict erupted. Let's get a little bit more on this. We can speak now live to Juliette Touma, who is the Director of Communications with UNRWA, which is the UN humanitarian organization inside Gaza, who can speak to us live now. Juliette Touma, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on BBC News. Can you just give us a sense of the situation on the ground as far as you're concerned?
It's going from bad to worse by the hour. It has been one very, very long month of sheer hell for people in Gaza, including for our own staff. We're very, very sad to confirm that we have lost 89 colleagues of ours who were killed during this war in Gaza. Our shelters, which are now hosting more than 700,000 people, are overflowing, overcrowded, and we are very short of supplies, including of fuel. We have been calling for fuel for nearly 2.5 weeks now. Not one drop of fuel has been received into the Gaza Strip.
Our condolences, of course, to the families and friends of those colleagues who have died. I was reading that the UN says that this is the single biggest loss of life of UN workers in any conflict in its history. Can we talk a little bit more about the issue of fuel? Because the United States was saying that they had been told by Israel that there is an emergency mechanism in place to deliver fuel when the hospitals run out completely. Are you aware of what that mechanism would be, and how close, in your view, are we to fuel running out completely inside Gaza?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not sure why do we have to force medical facilities in a place that provides medical assistance to 2 million people to be depleted of the basics. That's one. The second thing is that we are running out of fuel. UNRWA is running out of fuel. We need that fuel for our own humanitarian operations. We have rationed over the past couple of weeks to the very, very limit, and we are stretched, and so we need fuel. All these trucks that have been coming in, which are very, very good, I mean, they're tiny, the number, they did not have any fuel, and fuel is running out, and we need it for our own humanitarian operation, the largest humanitarian operations in the Gaza Strip right now.
We talked there about fuel and about the trucks coming in. There were reports yesterday that 93 trucks entered from Rafah crossing yesterday. Are you getting a sense of how many trucks have been coming in today?
No, not yet. Not yet. We only report on when these convoys touch on Gazan soil. But look, it's a drop in the ocean, because all these trucks combined since the 21st of October, all of them combined do not come to what Gaza used to receive on a daily basis, right? So the number continues to be extremely tiny. Every day, the average is between 6 to 9% of what Gaza used to get. And this is before the war. So the needs are now believed to be even higher than what Gaza needed before the war. So there needs to be more trucks, more humanitarian flow, no interruptions. The operation needs to be much smoother, and there needs to be fuel on those trucks.
Okay, Juliette Touma from the United Nations humanitarian organization inside Gaza, thank you very much indeed. Let's just look at live pictures coming into us of the view from southern Israel across into Gaza, close to where we are. You can see there some of the devastation in the Gaza Strip after that military offensive grinds on, and you can probably see also the impact of some of the airstrikes. We've been hearing the thud of artillery, outgoing Israeli artillery this morning, and the boom of airstrikes inside Gaza. We are about 3 kilometers away, about a mile or so away from the Gaza Strip as the military offensive intensifies. The United Nations Secretary General saying that Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. A glimmer of hope, just to leave you with, which is that having overtly rejected the idea of humanitarian pauses when he was speaking to the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Prime Minister, has now appeared to be a little bit more nuanced behind the scenes. And in an interview with American News last night, he said, "I suppose we'll check the circumstances in order to enable goods to come in. We've had these sorts of pauses before, so potentially he is less inflexible behind closed doors than we think, raising the possibility of some kind of humanitarian pauses that would be a moment of relief for the civilians inside Gaza, and potentially a potential to talk and to discuss and reach some kind of progress, maybe, on hostage release. But we wait to hear whether that will materialize. For now, it is, of course, the circle of suffering that continues and intensifies in Gaza. We will continue to bring you all the latest developments from inside Gaza, from here in southern Israel as well. But for now, I will hand you back to London.
Thank you, Mark, with the very latest on the ongoing conflict. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Well, from the studio in London, let's look at some other stories making the news. People in Ohio will vote on Tuesday on whether to add explicit protections in the state constitution for reproductive decisions, including abortion. The measure would enshrine the right to an abortion up to viability, which is usually around 24 weeks. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said in his daily address that it's irresponsible to talk of holding presidential elections next year in a time of war when Ukraine requires unity. Ukraine's next presidential election is due to be held in 2024. And Italy will build 2 centres in Albania to host tens of thousands of illegal migrants. The centres will open next spring and will be able to process up to 36,000 people in a year. The plan will apply to those people rescued at sea by Italian boats, with the exception of pregnant women, children and vulnerable people. You're live with BBC News. The Prince of Wales is in Singapore for the 3rd annual Earthshot Prize award ceremony. Prince William founded the ceremony back in 2020, and each year 5 people are awarded a £1 million prize for their contributions to environmentalism, allowing them to expand on their innovations to help protect the planet. Well, he spoke a little earlier about the impact the awards have had.
Really excited about this year's winners and finalists. Last year we had 2 companies, both have expanded by 8 times and are moving into different countries. So it's all about scale now. My job is to really kind of bring the money and the capital and the private sector into the Earthshot and meet the solutions and go, come on, how can we scale? How can we do more?
Well, let's go live now to Singapore, where we can speak to our correspondent, Suranjana Tiwari. And Suranjana, the Prince of Wales, he has arrived at the ceremony we're hearing. Just talk us through what's been happening, what he's been saying.
Well, he came to the real touch of glamour at the award ceremony. On the green carpet with him, welcoming him, was Hannah Waddingham, Kate Blanchett and other celebrities, including the band Bastille. And he said, he was talking to them, he said how proud he was of the event and how proud he was that it's happening here in Asia, with so many countries really at the forefront of climate change. As we heard from Prince William a little earlier, one of the main reasons that he started these awards is try to help these smaller organizations scale up and really expand in order to find real and robust solutions to the climate emergency.
And what are some of those solutions that people have been coming up with? Of course, the winners will receive that large amount of money, £1 million.
That's right. We had the privilege of meeting the 15 finalists. Only 5 will, of course, win and get that £1 million. There was one organisation from Poland which is working to clean up smog and dirty air. The husband and wife who run that organisation told me that if they win, they'll use the money to try and expand their organisation in other cities that suffer from severe pollution. There was also a Hong Kong-based company not far from here that is trying to make recycled batteries for electric cars. Of course, we know the electric car explosion is coming, and they're trying to clean up the parts that go into those vehicles. Another company in India, it's helping farmers who have surplus crops to try and turn them into other products, things like tomato ketchup if they have too many tomatoes one season. So they were all very excited. They were anticipating the winners when they are announced in about an hour and a half from now.
Suranjana Tawari in Singapore with that update. Well, let's head back to the UK now, where King Charles is due to deliver the King's speech as part of the state opening of Parliament in the next few minutes. It's his first since becoming monarch. Well, let's cross live now to Ben Thompson, who is in Westminster and covering the events throughout the day. Ben.
Yes, welcome to Westminster. Good morning from here on a day of pomp and pageantry, of political process and parliamentary procedure. There's a lot going on. We've just seen the King and Queen make their way into the Palace of Westminster here, and so begins a day of political process. What they'll be doing right now is making their way to the robing room. They will wear the robes of state before making their way to the House of Lords, the second chamber here in the UK Parliament. There, the King will deliver a speech not written by him, but written by the government, the Conservative government here in the UK. He will deliver that speech laying out the plans and processes and the ambitions of the government for the year ahead. In that chamber will be MPs and Lords. MPs, of course, from the House of Commons, and the Lords who sit in the House of Lords. He'll deliver that speech from a throne, and he will have to do it with neutrality. It is written by the government, but he delivers it from a neutral position. But it is all part of the state opening of Parliament, signifying the beginning of a new political year, a new parliamentary term. So the stakes are high because we've said it is significant because it is the first King's speech in 70 years. The King himself has been here before. He's been here either to accompany his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth, or, as he did last year, deliver the speech on her behalf. This year, the first time, he will deliver it as monarch. So let's bring in our political correspondent, Damien Grammaticus, who is with me. And Damien, it's a significant day, both for the monarchy but also for the government here. Just talk to me about the importance of what we may hear throughout this morning.
Yes, so for the monarchy, this is the moment that symbolises their role in the life of the nation, the political life of the nation, and coming here, opening Parliament, you get all the three branches, you get the House of Lords, the House of Commons and the monarch all together in one place, and listening to the programme for the year. And the programme for the coming year is really important because that is what the government is focusing on. And right now, this is Rishi Sunak's, not just King Charles's first speech as King, it's Rishi Sunak's first as Prime Minister, and possibly his only one, almost likely to be his only one before an election, and maybe his only one if he doesn't win that election. The government is trailing badly in the polls. Think back over the last few months, couple of years, the government has been losing by-elections heavily by record margins to the opposition Labour Party in recent months. He needs to change that dynamic. How's he going to do that? Well, what he's going to lay out here today, what King Charles will lay out on his behalf here today, is at the heart of that.
People watching this around the world, Damien, will wonder why the King is involved in politics. But there's an important distinction here, isn't there, to separate the monarch from politics. Just to explain why that is so important and how it is done here.
Yes, so the monarch as head of state is not head of government. He's head of state, but not head of government. So he has a ceremonial role here. He doesn't write the speech; it's the words of the government. That's one way it's separated. He doesn't enter the chamber of the House of Commons, where elected MPs sit. He's not allowed to. That symbolises how they're completely independent of him. He can't set foot in there. They have to go to listen to him in the other end, in the House of Lords. Again, that symbolises the independence. So for him, that's sort of the vital role he plays in the political life of the nation. There's no written constitution, but we see it working out here. And with all this pageantry, the beautiful gleaming, helmets in the sunshine, all that stuff shows you the tradition, the hundreds of years that this has been going on. But really, it then gets down to the sort of nuts and bolts of the politics. And Rishi Sunak's aim in this really is to try to find things that can distinguish him from the opposition. So we're going to see a focus on law and order, a focus on energy, using UK energy supplies, that kind of thing that he's trying to say, here are reasons to vote for me.
Damien, for now, thank you so much. Damien Grammaticus there, our political correspondent. So we will show you inside the Palace of Westminster. As we said, a day of pomp and pageantry, but also a lot of political process too. Continuing coverage of the state opening of Parliament here on BBC News.